We're going to look at another essential of a valid contract, which is legality. So we shall look at the legality in contracts. This section covers the concept of legality in contracts, the types of illegal contracts, and then the effects of illegality on enforceability. So the key objectives of this section is to understand legality as an element of a contract, then to identify the different types of contracts, of illegal contracts, then to explain the effects of illegality on a contract. So the definition of illegality: for a contract to be valid, its subject matter must be lawful. So contracts that involve illegal activities, violate statutes, or contradict public policy are unenforceable. So for a contract to be legally enforceable, its subject matter must be lawful. So illegal contracts are agreements that violate law, morality, or public policy, and such contracts are considered void and unenforceable in courts. So we are going to look at the different types of illegal contracts. The first one we have is the contract to commit a crime, tort, or fraud. Agreements involve unlawful acts such as criminal activities, civil wrongings, and fraudulent dealings. For example, an agreement to incite violence or disrupt public order is illegal. So this was seen in the case of Dan versus Carson in 1911. So in this case, two people agreed to disrupt public order by causing trouble at a political event. So one party later refused to pay the other for their role in the plan. So the person who wasn't paid sued to recover their money. So court refused to enforce the contract because it involved an illegal act of disrupting public order. So since the agreement was unlawful or was illegal, neither party could seek legal help to enforce it. So from this case we learn that if a contract involves committing a crime or a civil wrong or fraud, court will not recognize. The second type of illegal contracts is the agreement to defraud or deceive. This one involves any contract aimed at deceiving others, such as obtaining jobs through bribery or secret commissions. This was seen in the case of Waldo versus Martin in 1825. Mr. Waldo agreed to pay Mr. Martin a secret commission or a bribe in exchange for securing him a job. After Martin received the money, he refused to share part of it with Waldo as initially promised. So Waldo then sued Martin to claim his share of the money. So the court decision ruled in favor of Martin, declaring that the agreement was illegal because it was based on bribery and deception. So since the contract involved fraud, Waldo could not claim for any money. So the lesson from this case is any contract based on fraud, bribery, or deception is illegal and cannot be enforced in court. Third type of illegal contract is the contract involving sexual immorality. So this includes prostitution-related agreements. So this was seen in the case of Peace versus Brooks in 1866. So in this case, Miss Peace, a prostitute, rented space from Mr. Brooks for her work. So when she refused to pay for that rental, Brooks sued her to recover the money. So court decision ruled in favor of Peace, stating that Brooks knew that the rental was being used for immoral purposes, which is prostitution. Since the contract supported an illegal activity, it was unenforceable, so Brooks could not recover his money from Miss Peace. So the lesson from this case is that contracts that promote or support immoral activities like prostitution are illegal and cannot be enforced in court. Fourth type we have is the contracts prejudicial to public safety. So these ones include the contracts that aid enemy states. And this was seen in the case of Furtado versus Rogers in 1802. So in this case, Mr. Furtado, a British citizen, purchased an insurance policy for a French ship during wartime. So when the ship was lost, Furtado tried to claim compensation from Mr. Rogers, who was the insurance provider. So court ruled in favor of Rogers, stating that the contract was illegal because it involved an enemy nation during wartime. So since the agreement went against national security, it could not be enforced. So the lesson from this case is that contracts that harm national security or benefit enemy states are illegal and void. Another illegal contract we have is the contract prejudicial to justice administration. So any contract that interferes with the legal system, such as agreements to withdraw lawsuits or give false testimony, is illegal. So courts do not recognize such contracts because they obstruct justice. Another type of illegal contracts we have is a contract to corrupt public life. So contracts that involve bribery or manipulation of public offices are illegal. For example, bribing officials to secure a title is against public policy. So this was seen in the case of Paxson versus the College of Ambulance Limited in 1925. So Mr. Paxson donated money to the College of Ambulance Limited under the condition that he would be recommended for a high-ranking title. So after paying the money and not receiving the title, he sued the organization to get back his money. So court ruled in the favor of the College of Ambulance Limited, stating that the contract was illegal because it involved bribery, since Paxson attempted to buy public honor. So the contract was considered corrupt and unenforceable. So the lesson from this case is that contracts involving bribery, corruption, or influence over public offices are illegal and void. The last type of illegal contracts we have is the contracts to defraud revenue. For example, tax evasion agreements. This was seen in the case of Napa versus National Business Agency Limited in 1951. So in this case, Mr. Napa was an employee of National Business Agency Limited. So he was a director, and then he was given part of his salary as expenses instead of wages, so that the company can reduce on the tax payments. So when a dispute arose over the payments, company tried to enforce the agreement in court, the agreement between Mr. Napa and the business, that they agreed that part of his wage or his salary should be treated as expenses. So court ruled in favor of Mr. Napa, stating that the contract was illegal because it was designed to evade taxes. Since the agreement was an attempt to defraud government revenue, it was void and could not be enforced. So the lesson from this case is that contracts created to evade taxes or commit financial fraud are illegal and will not be upheld. We have the void but not necessarily illegal contracts. So these are contracts that are not automatically illegal, but they are void for various reasons, meaning they cannot be enforced by court. Contracts hosting court jurisdiction. For example, agreements preventing access to legal recourse. In the case of Lee versus Shoremen Guilds in 1952. So in this case, Lee entered into an agreement with the Shoremen Guilds that included a clause preventing him from taking any disputes to court. So the contract removed the possibility of seeking legal recourse through the judicial system in case anything happened between them. So they had a condition that Mr. Lee could not go to court in case anything happened. So the court decision ruled that the contract was void because it attempted to prevent legal disputes from being resolved by the courts. So even though the contract was not illegal, the court could not enforce such an agreement as it violated fundamental rights to access justice. So we have contracts prejudicial to marriage. These ones include agreements restricting marriage choices. So this was seen in the case of Law versus Pierce in 1976. So in this case, Mr. Law entered into a contract with Mr. Pierce where he agreed not to marry anyone without Mr. Pierce's approval. So this contract attempted to restrict Mr. Law's personal choice of a spouse. So court decision was that the contract was void because it interfered with Mr. Law's fundamental right to marry whom he chose. So such a contract was considered infringe on personal freedom and therefore it was unenforceable. So the lesson from this case is that any contract that imposes unreasonable restrictions on a person's right to marry or choice of a spouse is void. Contracts in restraint of trade. Contracts that restrain trade or competition. This was seen in the case of Foster and Sons Limited versus Sajet in 1918. So in this case, Mr. Foster and Mr. Sajet entered into a contract where Sajet agreed not to compete with Foster and Sons Limited in the same industry for a set period of time and within a defined geographical area. So the court decision was that contracts in restraint of trade must be reasonable. So in this case, court found terms of the restraint unreasonable, particularly the time and the area restrictions, and declared the contract void. However, court clarified that reasonable restrictions to prevent unfair competition can be valid. But for this case, they were not valid. So contracts that restrain trade or competition must be reasonable in terms of time, geographical area, and necessity for business purposes. So let's have the consequences of illegality. So what happens if the contract has an illegal element? First is that courts will not enforce illegal contracts. Then money paid under an illegal contract cannot be recovered. Then parties engaging in illegal contracts may face legal penalties from court. So that is all about legality in contracts. Thanks for watching.